Lucia Serrate suffered from pituitary dwarfism and, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, she was the adult with the lowest weight in history. At age 17, she weighed only 2.1 kilograms. This is the second part about circus freaks. I'll post a link to the first video in the attached commentary. At the beginning of the video, I will ask you to subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. Your support is very important to me. Thank you. Let's get on with it. The girl was born on January 2, 1863, in the city of Veracruz. In 1876, during a visit by a commission of physicians, it was found that she was 55 centimeters tall and had a shin circumference of 10 centimeters, only 2.5 centimeters larger than the circumference of an adult's big toe. She lived with her parents, and scholarly visitors found that Lucia appeared healthy and intelligent and spoke English along with her native Spanish. Lucia had siblings who were perfectly healthy children. She was first introduced to the general public at the age of 12 at a show in the United States, after which she began a successful career in the circus, where, thanks to her unique size, she became part of the freak circus fashionable at the time. Lucia's earnings in the circus were very high and reached $20 per hour. On tour, Lucia took her maid and interpreter with her. Her dresses were made by expensive tailors, food was cooked to a special order. In addition, over the years Lucia acquired a passion for expensive jewelry. Lucia did not live long. Her life was tragically cut short. In 1890, the train in which Lucia was visiting got stuck in the mountains and most of the passengers died of hypothermia. Robert Owen Melvin, nicknamed Bob, the man with two faces. He was born in Missouri on May 9, 1920. He was one of 6 children in the family. Robert was examined all his life by doctors who tried in vain to find an explanation for his deformity and to make a proper diagnosis. It was later determined that Bob suffered from a very rare disease called neurofibromatosis. He was unable to attend school because of his, to say the least, unusual appearance, but excelled in math and later helped in the circus in which he performed. Bob got into show business in 1949, and in 1952 he married his longtime girlfriend Virginia. They later had a daughter, who gave the Malvin couple a grandson and granddaughter. On the whole, Robert Edwin's career was very successful. He even starred in several movies. Bob was a religious and friendly man. He died in his hometown of Lancaster on November 19, 1995. Chang and Ng Banker were born in 1811 in what is now Thailand. When the unusual babies, gnarled around the rib cage, were born, it made a lot of noise. 19th century medicine did not yet know how to operate to separate Siamese twins. So the boys had to accept the fact that they would be inseparable for the rest of their lives. Although modern medicine would have easily helped them. In 1829, the Bankers signed a touring contract with the circus of British businessman Robert Hunter and toured the world with him. After finishing their contract, the brothers settled in the U.S., where they began working for themselves. They each started a family. Bengo and his wife had 10 children, and Ng and his wife could boast 11. And both brothers paid a fair amount of attention to their families. The secret of the brothers was that they lived 3 days in one house and 3 days in the other. In this way, they managed to keep the family together, and no one felt disadvantaged. The Banker brothers lived 63 years. And when Chung fell ill with pneumonia, and one night he was gone, Ng urgently called a surgeon to perform a separation surgery. But he couldn't get to him until 3 o'clock, when it was too late. By then Ng was already dead. It was because of them that people born with the disease were called Siamese twins. Grace Daniels was born on an Iowa farm in 1880. She suffered from Vater syndrome, a condition in which, among other things, multiple benign skin tumors appear. As she grew older, the disease progressed and Grace's face became more and more deformed. Her lips were so disfigured that it was difficult to understand what she was saying. In 1935, she won a mock contest for the title of Ugliest Woman. There she was spotted by freak show owner Miller and invited to work for him. Once in show business, Grace was extremely painful about being called a freak and given the title the world's ugliest woman. Outside of appearances, she tried to hide her defect with makeup and also covered her ears to avoid hearing conversations behind her back. She wanted to be called a mule woman instead of an ugly one. But no matter what, Grace stayed in the troupe because the pay there was excellent, and the pay increased every year. Those who knew Grace say she was a wonderful friend and a wonderful mother and loved her son very much. Grace was never married. She was tricked by a drunken carnival worker, which resulted in the birth of her son Elmer. Elmer inherited his father's vile character. He drank heavily, was addicted to morphine, and was an avid gambler. After becoming her impresario, Elmer insulted her mother, stole money from her, got drunk, and caused scandals. All this led to showmen refusing to take Grace on their shows just to avoid dealing with Elmer. Grace passed away in 1950. A little later, Elmer died of cirrhosis of the liver. Another woman, Mary Ann Webster, often performed in the same circus as Grace. Marian was born in 1874 in London to a family with 7 other children besides her. As a young girl, being a pretty girl, she worked as a nurse. In the year Mary Ann married Thomas Bevan, to whom she had 4 children. Symptoms of the disease began to appear shortly after her marriage at age 32. Symptoms of a disease called acromegaly, a form of progressive gigantism that causes abnormal growth and distortion of the facial muscles. When her husband died in 1914, the woman had to support her family on her own for a livelihood. The unfortunate woman entered a competition to be named the ugliest woman in the world and won. In 20, she was hired by the Freak Circus to work in Coney Island. Here she participated in performances in which she was positioned as a freak. At this circus, Mary Ann spent the rest of her life until she died in 1933 at the age of 59. At the time of her death, she weighed 76 pounds and was 170 centimeters tall. Gene Libero became known as the man with 2 bodies. Gene was born in 1880 in Rome to an ordinary Italian family. He was the 4th of 13 children, and no one else in his family had any physical abnormalities. What made Gene unique was a parasitic twin about 18 centimeters long that grew into his chest area. On X-rays in the man's chest, doctors also found the twin's head, about 15 centimeters in circumference. Although the second body had hardly grown, it was fully formed. And any changes of state, even light touches to the body of the parasite, were felt by the main body. Libero underwent many examinations. He was a constant participant of medical forums with prominent representatives of medicine of that time, who unanimously declared that the phenomenon of Libero was the greatest anomaly of the body that ever existed in nature. Libero was happily married. He had 4 children without any abnormalities. Gene died in 1934 at the age of 50. Grady Styles Jr. was born on July 18th in Pittsburgh and had a congenital limb defect known to science as didactyly. His hands and feet were split in 2. The 3 middle fingers were missing, and it was separately formed something like pincers. There was a 50% chance of this genetic defect being inherited. And Eddie was the 6th man in a family of hereditary fair and circus freaks. Freddie began performing in the circus from the age of 7 and was known by his creative pseudonym as Crab Boy or Lobster Boy. The boy grew up and became a success with the audience and women. But only another member of the Carnival of Freaks agreed to marry him. She bore him 4 children, 2 of whom had a hereditary defect. With them Styles and toured with a troupe called the Lobster Family. Styles drank a lot. He had a feisty temper and monstrous strength. Moving with his arms, he incredibly developed upper body muscles, which he used to beat his wife and children constantly. In 1978, his physically normal eldest daughter Donna decided to get married. Grady did not approve of his daughter's choice and expressed his displeasure by shooting his frustrated son-in-law the day before the wedding. Although Grady pleaded guilty and had no remorse, he did not go to prison. The court, for humane reasons, sentenced him to 15 years with probation. Eventually, the family's patience snapped, and on November 29, 1992, his wife Mary and her son from a previous marriage, Harry Newman Jr., saved $1,500 and hired 17-year-old Chris Waint, who shot Grady in the head. Schlitz's real name, date, and place of birth are unknown. It is generally accepted that he was born on September 10, 1905, in the Bronx, New York. Schlitz was born with microcephaly, a malformation that caused him to have a very small brain and skull. He was short, 122 centimeters tall. He suffered from myopia and a severe form of mental retardation. His intellect was considered to be at the developmental level of a 3-year-old child. He was unable to take care of himself fully and could only pronounce isolated words and a few very simple phrases. Those who knew Schlitz described him as a sweet, lively, and strong man. In keeping with the traditional practices of those times, it can be assumed that Schlitz was bought or simply taken from his biological parents, of whom no information remains. His guardians were usually his employers. Responsibility for him passed from one person to another as the circus rides where he performed were sold. Performing on the street in street circuses was a great success, and throughout the 20s and 30s he worked with many circuses. And world fame was brought to him by his role in the movie Freaks. Schlitz continued to work in the circus until 65, when his new masters assigned him to the Los Angeles County Hospital. He suffered greatly from not being able to participate in shows, and being away from the public made him sad and depressed. Eventually, the hospital authorities decided that the best care Schlitz could provide was for the circus and returned him to the stage. Schlitz lived in Los Angeles during the last years of his life, occasionally performing in various shows. He died in '72 at the age of about 70 of bronchial pneumonia. He was originally buried in an unmarked grave in Roland Haynes Cemetery. In 2009, however, his admirers initiated a successful fundraising campaign to place a headstone with his name on the grave. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and write what you think about it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support is very important to me.